Let's talk about job interviews. I would like to summarize how to proceed regarding job interviews. So I was tempted to call that presentation facing your first job interview, but then I realized that most of the things I talk about here are valid for your first job interview and for the last one in 30 years time, hopefully, right? So it's a bunch of common basic rules that will help you to get a job. And even though they are very simplistic, the majority of them, something I've noticed through my career is that most of them are ignored by candidates, right? So you may not agree in all of them, that's fine. Everyone has different styles, everyone has different approaches. This bunch of steps have worked really, really well in my career, really, really well. So I just wanted to share them with you and just adopt, the ones that you consider relevant. Simple as that, right? Again, this is very personal. So I would like to split that in 3 parts. What should you do before the interview, during the interview, and after the interview. So before the interview. Some companies, the very first question they will ask you is, thank you for coming, blah, blah. What do you know about us? It's terrible when someone says, right? So just prepare it. If you are applying to a job spec, it's because you're supposed to be motivated to join that company, right? If you don't know what to say, because probably the only thing you care about is money, right? It's not a good first message. So first impression only happens once. So please look after the company, check the team, the product, services, whatever the guys do, right? And to me, probably the most important one, or not the most important one, but the one that generally speaking 90% of the time is ignored, and that could clearly make the difference. Check about the person who will drive the interview. This is very important. It changes everything. If I'm interviewing someone and that person, when he's explaining something he's done, and he tells me, yes, because I've used that technology. I saw that you used that technology as well 10 years ago in your LinkedIn. Like, oh, what? So the guy, took some time to look on my profile on LinkedIn, to see my experience, to see my projects, and there is a connection there, right? So this is really exotic to happen, but if you do that, yes, that's a big plus, so please do it. And I reckon that sometimes it's a bit complicated to know who is going to interview you, because eventually your offers, your specs will be filtered by a recruitment agency. So they may not even know, who is going to do the interview, but please chase them. If there is a man in the middle, if you are connected to that company by someone else, please try to obtain as much information as possible about the product, the team, and the people who is driving the interview. During the interview, timing, right? Free suggestions, right? You can take whichever you prefer. If you do an interview and you are late, that's super bad, right? Like it's the first contact, right, with them. That's not good. So don't do that. It's better if you arrive, even if you have to arrive 1 hour earlier, because sometimes, not accidents, a problem may happen with the tube, you may struggle to find the place, So I recommend you just go earlier, even if you need to be there 1 hour earlier. Once you find where the place is, then grab a coffee or do whatever, right? But at least you know where the place is and all these things. So about the dress code, this is not that important when talking about software development, but yeah, it's interesting to try to match the company's dress code. For some firms, this is pretty easy, or it's obvious. If you join a non-fintech startup, probably they will be casual. If you are joining a big banking corporation, it will be business, right? So, I mean, generally speaking, you can wear whatever kind of dress code, right? That's fine. If there is a recruitment agency in between, ask them what's the dress code. They will be happy to help you, to give you advice on that, right? Yeah, it's fine to look a bit smarter than usual, or than the company's dress code, because it's a job interview. Yeah, I've been interviewing people wearing a suit in a startup, and to me that's a bit weird. But anyway, this is just about the look and feel, if you want, right? So this is not that important. Cool. Yeah, so we've been working a lot with the hard skills over the last couple of months. You've been improving a lot, massively, your technical skills. Think about where you were 2 months ago, where you are now, how much you've progressed, technically speaking, and that's great. That's a must. Unfortunately, that may not be enough to get a job. Why? Because especially at the beginning, I will say that the soft skills are as important as the hard skills. Because even though you've learned a lot, still you don't have experience. Because of that, still that may happen, especially in a small company, that they hire you because you're good technically speaking, right? So they may hire you because they want to take advantage of your skills. But especially if you're thinking to join a big company, even if you are really good, in reality, there will be people better than you, right? That's normal. First of all, because they have better, they have a better understanding about technology. But on top of their hard skills, on top of their coding challenge skills, if you want, they know the product. So they know all the tricks, they know all the components, right? So that means that they are not probably expecting that much from your side, technically speaking. Whatever you know, hey, that's awesome. But the main reason why they will decide to hire you or not to hire you is because of the attitude. If they feel like, even though you have some basic understanding about coding, but if they feel that you have the right attitude, the right motivation to learn, they will hire you. Because they are going to invest on you, right? They're going to think, hey, today, on the first day, we reckon you're not going to be that productive. But because you have the right attitude, you can learn quickly, blah, 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 we invest in you because we know that in a few months' time, this will pay off, right? So, please, prove that you are motivated to get that position. And how can you prove that motivation? So, as we said before, research, company, products, services. While doing the interview, they will tell you lots of things. Yes, take notes, right? Never go to a job interview without a notepad. That feels really horrible, right? Take notes. I'll tell you something, even if you don't really care about something they are explaining, because that may happen, just take notes. That proves motivation, that proves attitude, right? And please show emotions. We are humans, right? We are humans. Don't forget that the recruiters spend a lot of time on interview processes. I've been working in companies where for periods of time, half of my time was literally sitting with candidates. That's super stressful in the long term. Because of that, show emotions. Prove that you are different, that you can bring value to the team. Generally speaking, if you work with senior developers, well, I was going to say they don't have emotions, that's not true. But generally speaking, they are very strict because they are really good, they are very well organized, and it's perfect if you, I'm organized as well, so that's fine, no problem at all. But at least, they are sometimes lacking for some fresh energy. Like, this guy, he wants to break, he wants to do something new. This kind of energy is positive for the teams that are well structured, right? So don't miss that opportunity to show feelings. Yeah, so that's pretty much. They may ask you, I think someone told me, I think it was Tom, I don't know who told me that, or Victor, I think it was you, right? that one of the companies was asking about money, right? How much you want to make, right? Right. So that's super personal. You may absolutely disagree on that, but I will try to avoid talking about money. Why? Because for you, the most important thing is to break into the market, right? So you should express how keen you are to join that team, how much you like the product, how much you like the services, right? You are not a money-driven person, and the only thing you want to do is to join them and blah, 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 blah. So it happened to me in one occasion that because of saying that, so obviously when you apply, you know the salary range, right, more or less. But because some people say, hey, but if I mention that, they will probably pay me less, or not. It could be on the other way around. It happened to me once that by mentioning all these things, they end up paying me like 20% more than the official salary range. Why? Because it's valuable. Hey, this person, look, he doesn't care about money. He just wants to learn. He just wants to, hey, let's pay him or her more because he's or she's motivated, right? They may ask you strengths and weaknesses, so be prepared for that, right? What are your strong skills? What are, your main weaknesses? So just think about them up front, because they will ask you these questions in most of the job interviews, right? And also when you talk about weaknesses, obviously be honest, and at the same time try to transform a weakness into a strength, kind of.
Something we can fix, but not like I'm too good at like something.
Yeah. So to me,
I'm too organized.
Yeah, exactly. So
Something you can improve.
Yeah, exactly. If your weakness is I don't like to have a shower in the summertime, that's a bit dodgy, right? So don't say that. Well, don't, or look after your these things. But for example, so I used to mention that one, and that because that's true. I'm honest, and I know that this is not that exotic. That happens with lots of developers. You had a tough day in office. Something doesn't work as you expect, then you go home and you struggle to disconnect because your mind is still thinking about the issue, right? That's a problem. That's a problem because we should disconnect from work, right? But if that ever happens, that's a problem. But at the same time, it proves motivation, right? So you see that we are, driving our interview towards the same point, that we are motivated, we are keen to learn, and we are super excited to join the team. And then the hard skills. So be prepared to read others' code. This is what we've been doing board challenges, right? So they may show you a piece of code in a whiteboard. They may show you a piece of code in the computer, and they may want to see, first of all, if you understand the algorithm. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, even if you understand the algorithm, how good you are sharing your thoughts about it, which are two related, but there's different things. You may understand something really well, but you may struggle to express how it works, right? This is about communication. Then feel free to ask questions. If you don't understand something, it's much better to ask for help, what that means, rather than saying, I don't know, maybe, right? So try to be proactive. If they show you an algorithm, if they are using a for loop to, add elements to an array, it's super valuable to offer different alternatives. Like, this is creating a new array, adding elements, that's good. We could also use a map or reduce, because that proves skills, right? That proves that you know how to do things. And the last thing that probably is not going to be a problem at the beginning, but it may be a problem once you work as a senior developer. Be polite. So why? That sounds obvious, but I had bad experiences with candidates. So probably not at the beginning. At the beginning, they will show you a snippet, basic function, how this works, But once you apply for a senior position, they may show you real code of the product they are building, because they don't want to see if you know how to sort an array. They want to show you their code, and they want to see how able you are to deal with that code, right? That means that you may find bad code, because real code sometimes is bad code, right? And that happens. That's how real life works. If that ever happens, it's okay. It's fantastic to prove your value by suggesting improvements, but please be polite. Why? Because sometimes it's easy to forget that bad code has been written by dozens of developers over years. So, it's complicated to maintain good quality code over time. It's very complicated, even if there is top talented people working on it. So the worst thing you can do is to blame about that code, because the code could be horrible, could be shit, but it doesn't help you to demonstrate that the code is absolutely awful, because probably they know already it's awful. It's not their fault neither. This is legacy code, right? It's okay to propose, to suggest, but please understand that code is bad because of a reason, not because of these two guys who are interviewing you are bad. It's because legacy, historical reasons. And then, if you Google a bit, there are lots of blog posts and things like that they talk about the common or classic technical interviews. They will ask you things about arrays. They will ask you about prototypal inheritance. They will ask you about objects. They may ask you about your favorite ES6 features. So think about that, right? You've been doing lots of ES6 plus things. But if they ask you about your favorite ones, you may struggle a bit if you didn't prepare it, right? So just think about what are you, probably talk about the REST operator, all these things, right? About React, if they work with React, obviously they may ask you about what the state is, how to pass variables from one component to the other, blah, blah, blah. If you know the technology stack, because you may know it, right? That's part of the spec. So obviously try to do some research about it. So for example, if a company like Sky is looking for people with Redux, as I talked with Tom, just please try to learn a bit about Redux, right? That will prove attitude. Even if you have no real experience with Redux, just the fact that you went to the interview and you spend some time researching about Redux just because they are using Redux, that proves value. Classic question. I always ask this question. How specificity works in CSS? Does anyone know? Probably not yet, right? That's something that, listen, you know how it works, but if you get that question literally, you may struggle to give an answer. So we'll do a workshop about this. It will be a short workshop because it's simple, right? But you just need to get familiar with the word specificity.
When you don't know an answer to one of these questions,
yeah,
would you just say I don't know?
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Please be honest, right? If you have literally no idea about what they are asking, it's better, in my opinion, to be honest and say, look, sorry, I don't know that question, but I'm very curious to see how this works. So they will give you the answer. So please, you take some notes and you prove that you understood the answer, and then you can tell them, okay, I'll never forget that, right? Because that used to happen, right? That happened to me. They asked me something, I don't know the answer, and that will remain in your mind forever, right? Another one, what do you think about the importance suffix in CSS? Right? Is that good or not? What do you think? It's not good, right? Correct. Why? Well, all these things, right? All these things you should learn a bit. I mean, this slide is pretty much go to Google and search for the common technical interviews. There is nothing exotic, I believe, right? There is one of my favorite ones is, what do you think, when will you use document.write? Have you ever heard document.write? So document.write is a very old command to update the content of your web page. If you do document.write and you put the text on it, the entire page will be replaced by that text. So some developers, they expected, I mean, they are like free, there were 2 answers, but then I realized they were free. So the bad answer is, yeah, sometimes wrong. So when they say, never, right? Never, that's what you expect, right? Never use document.write. But then someone told me once, in the 90s. And then I said, okay, that's a beautiful answer, right? Cool. Yeah, so then again, generally speaking, at the end of the session, they will probably start talking about the company, you'll have a chat with them, blah, blah, and then classic, right? So do you have any question for us, right? Don't forget that an interview is a bi-directional process. It's not just you answering questions like a coding challenge, right? They should answer questions as well. So if you go to an interview and at the end they ask you, do you have any questions? And you say, no, that's wrong, that's horrible, right? That's horrible. If you really want to join a company, yeah, you should ask questions, right? So try to be precise. So, for example, if they've talked about any of these things, obviously don't ask them again, right? But if not, classic questions you should ask: how is the team structure? Right? Do you work with Agile? What are the long-term plans for the product? That proves that you are interested to be there not for 3 months, but for long-term, right? And then, if you found something that either because you don't know or because you don't like on the technology stack, you can ask them, but again, in a polite way, right? Yes, out of curiosity, why are you using that thing, right? If it's, for example, if they are using something like a jQuery, which is very old, it could be okay, maybe, to ask that, right? Because if you're polite, it's a very subtle way to tell them, hey, this is very old, right? So that you prove, first of all, interest, and then you prove know-how, because you know that jQuery is very old. And then on a more personal level, if you want, because these questions are pretty generic, right? So the first 2 apply to every company. The third one, I'm sure you can find something on the technology stack you can talk about. But the last one is, because that's generally speaking the last question, and that's the most personal and the most successful question, right? Again, research. Go to LinkedIn if you know who is interviewing you. If you don't have that information, at least you know the website. You'll be able to find some information, social media, right? So try to find something that you find particularly interesting, and then ask about it, right? And I'll tell you something. In worst case, if you don't find anything interesting, that doesn't matter. Try to find something obscure in their platform, in their social media, and ask about it, because that will prove that you have spent some time researching, right? They will get a very good impression if this is your last question, because it's something personal. It's not something you can apply to every job interview, something that specifically applies to that company, product, or team. And then after the interview. So after the interview, it used to be a good idea to drop an email. Could be just a very quick email, saying thank you for your time, it was great to catch up, blah blah blah. From a technical point of view, if the interview was decent but you struggle with any question, and as Victor said before, and you were unable to give a good answer, or it could happen that you may know the answer but you are a bit nervous and you struggle a bit articulating your words. So it's a good strategy to send them an email saying, regarding that question about specificity, I would like to expand my thoughts, and then you talk about that, right? That proves attitude, like, oh, this guy, he or she went home and has spent some time, even if he didn't really know the answer, he or she doesn't know something, but he's immediately react to that problem, and now he or she knows the answer. This is very valuable, right? And if everything went fine, just literally, thank you, thanks for your time. And the last thing, that never happened to me, but I heard a couple of stories, so just be prepared for that, just in case. So this is unlikely to happen. But if you feel any kind of discrimination on the interview, you have the right to access the data that has been generated on that interview. I will give you an example. So if you are doing an interview and it's not going well, or even if it's going well, you feel like the attitude of one of the interviewers is not acceptable, like he's, making jokes or talking something about sexist language, whatever, right? Whatever. You feel this is inappropriate. So according to the EU, so the companies are forced to keep all the data. For example, if they are taking notes, so they should keep that for 6 months. Generally speaking, I mean, if it's a small company, they may not do that. But when you interview for a big company, so they are solicitors. They told you when every interview, don't throw the notes you took about the candidate. Just say them.
But you can, if you request them, can they not just say, "Oh, we didn't take too many notes," or they'll have?
No, they have legal requirement. And if they throw the notes, because that's the thing, right? If you know that one of the guys is drawing a picture of you,
or rewrite notes, they can rewrite the notes that they took, and then it's all a bit. I don't know.
I see the point. That may be difficult to prove, right?
Yeah.
But definitely, if they do something wrong, you have the legal right to do a formal complaint, right? And that's pretty much it, guys. Questions? No? Do you think this is any useful?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay, guys. So yeah, and apart from that, obviously we'll be in touch for the next days and weeks, right? So please, as I said, try to adopt. You don't have to take that as the Bible, of course not. This is very personal, but if any of these hints helps a bit, so yeah, that would be great. Cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you for watching.